It's hard to ignore the Occupy movement. This camp here at St Paul's became the thousandth in the world to spring up overnight, protesting about the way in which banks are making their money and how they're sharing it. The banks have benefited from taxpayers' bailouts, and the Bank of England has quantitatively eased some 200 billion to kickstart Britain's flatline economy. The trouble is, it hasn't eased the woes of corporate Britain, who say that it's near on impossible to get a bank loan. So we've come along to the camp to ask the question, does the City of London have a moral obligation to support British business?
I think that's a simple answer. Yes, it does. Of course it does, because it's a sort of got a moral obligation to support the people, and business is part of society.
No, I don't think the City of London does have a moral obligation. The City of London is an area for international finance, and it's there to service basically global business. Business no longer is a place just for UK businesses. In fact, the FTSE 100 has very few UK's only businesses.
Yes, I think it does, because it is an industry just as any other industry is in this country. There are some that make money, there are some that lose money. The City of London just happens to make quite a lot of the money. The problem is that they're not putting that money back into the country, back into business.
If you look at it from, say, a fund manager's perspective, their moral obligation is to provide a return for their investors. They aren't really going to be driven by investing in companies whether they're British per se. If you look at banks' perspective, maybe they have more of a moral obligation. Maybe with a close relationship with their customers, they need to be more supportive. But then bank shareholders would say their only obligation is to be prudent in these troubled times.
I think that people should be able to make a living is a really important thing that any city should be concerned with. But I think that along with that moral obligation to support business, it also has a moral obligation to hold business accountable for the way in which it does its business.
I believe the City of London does have a moral obligation. The days of the city-state are long gone. The city is responsible for a huge proportion of British GDP, and it's right that that wealth is spread through the rest of the UK through support of other businesses.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that the City of London has been so successful is that the whole stock market is completely open. And so you do get companies getting taken over, be it BAA or Associated British Ports, but also you get lots of companies listing here.
It's up really to governments and legislation to help the city invest in London. It's up to those the business opportunities being there for the City of London to want to invest. It doesn't work the other way around. It has to work that way around. The money will find the place to invest rather than actually have any moral obligation to invest in a UK business.
Can money making and financial services truly be compatible with ethics?
Yes, of course. I was lucky enough to work with Dr. Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh. He was the Nobel Peace Prize winner who developed microfinance, and I worked there for 8 months, and what I saw there was amazing. Like in Bangladesh, where I didn't have sort of expectations, I thought it was a great idea, but then when I went and worked there, and they have sort of 23 different businesses for Grameen, which is social enterprises, and it's a bank, and the system, I've been to the villages where it has worked, what the financial services have done.
This desire just to create profit, it seems to be getting out of hand, which is essentially why Occupy was born. It just came from this, feeling that these corporations are just getting out of control. And I read this morning that if a corporation was an actual person, it'd be a sociopath.
I accept that maybe when you get too much money, greed takes over and it does become non-ethical. And I think that's happened. I think what we need to do is perhaps get back to the days of the city like it was in the 70s or 80s. And the stock market should be there to provide capital to companies to grow, increase profits, increase prosperity, and actually increase the wealth of the country rather than one or two individuals.
They need to be more transparent, I feel.
How do directors in England get paid? Well, they employ non-executive directors to sit on panels to sort of establish what the directors should be paid, and the directors decide what the non-executive directors should be paid. So it's and that's legislation is needed to sort of change that, because it puts people in positions where under law they're acting in an ethical way, but is it really ethical? Probably not.
It's much more than about this executive pay issue that we're reading about at the moment. Financial services is complex. And the move to being more transparent has been hampered by complex legislation, taxation, and complex distribution systems. All of those have engendered complication, confusion and mistrust amongst consumers.
Obviously isn't going to be supportive of British business because there are no regulations in place to make it do so.
They don't answer to our parliament, you know. It's a little. I've just found out there's a little mini state within our country that doesn't have to answer to our parliament. In fact, it's got somebody that sits behind the speaker. His title is called the Remembrancer, and his job is to make sure that us commoners that vote don't interfere with the rights of the Corporation of London. It isn't democratic, really, is it?
It's not just about commerce, it's also about justice, it's also about individuals being given opportunities that are fair, and if they're unfairly treated, that being brought to justice.
What I'd like to see is financial services companies moving away from defending executive pay, implementing more robust systems, and perhaps focusing more about the good that the industry does, and a campaign to actually communicate this to consumers would create a more balanced view.
This is Hannah Beecham and the Inside Out film crew from the Occupy London site at St Paul's.